Was I wrong? Well, you're only going to find that out if you stick around. We'll talk about it right after this. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another week of eXplain, where we engage the culture from a biblical perspective in a manner which glorifies God. And this week, we are going to be doing one of those episodes. I've told you this before. There are certain shows that I do because I want to do them, and I don't care, what else is going on. There are some shows that I do because I have to do them, right? Whether I want to or not is just out of the question, right? I just do them because I have to, right? And this week, this is a show that I'm doing because I have to. Okay, we're going to talk about Nick Fuentes. We talked a little bit about Nick Fuentes last week. I kind of brought him up in passing as it relates to the whole Christ is King controversy, which we'll get into a little bit more of that today. But I specifically wanted to take a closer look at who is Nick Fuentes and what is going on with him. Because I was pretty surprised, honestly, at the amount of people in the comments to the YouTube video that we put out last week. I was pretty surprised at how many people basically came out defending Nick Fuentes. And honestly, I was just kind of going off of coming at it from the perspective of, well, I mean, don't we all know that he's anti-Semitic? Like, don't we all? Isn't that something that's been proven? Based off of the things that he said. But I guess it hasn't been. Because, well, I think it has been. But there are people who would disagree and say that this hasn't been proven. And so today I wanted to look into exactly who Nick Fuentes is, and just kind of ask the question: should we as Christians be listening to Nick Fuentes? Like, should we be giving him a serious listen? Should we be paying attention to what he is saying? And that's what we're going to talk about. And one thing that I want to say here right at the very beginning, I need to clarify something. One of you guys in the comments actually brought up something important last week. You had mentioned, and I could have been clearer on this, so I apologize. One of you had mentioned that rally that Nick Fuentes did that I talked about. I had said something about the rally, this rally having to do with Christ is King, that Nick Fuentes was a part of. I had mentioned something about that rally last week. Like, I had said, like, such and such a rally last week. And I could have been clearer on that, because what I should have said was that the clip of the rally was circulating on social media last week. So that's what I should have said there. So to whoever that was that pointed that out, I do appreciate that. We're here to go after the truth, and so that's why I want us to all be completely clear, and that's why I'm here today. So before we answer the question, like, is Nick Fuentes anti-Semitic? I want to look at what anti-Semitism actually is. Like, how should we define anti-Semitism? Because honestly, there are certain times when people will take the word anti-Semitism and just throw it around, at anything. That's not right? We want a definition of anti-Semitism that's faithful to the Bible, right? Just like we want a definition of anything that's faithful to the Bible. And so what I would say anti-Semitism is basically, it's the idea of partiality or hatred against a group of people based off the fact that they're Jewish, and that's the only reason, right? So partiality or hatred against a group of people based on the fact that they're Jewish, and only because of that fact, okay? And I think we need to even go further and define partiality. We're not talking about, I have two candidates here in front of me, and one of them is Jewish, and has nothing to do with the fact that he's Jewish, but doesn't have a good work ethic. And then there's another person who is black and has a good work ethic. And so I pick the guy who has the good work ethic regardless of his background. That's not anti-Semitism. Okay, anti-Semitism would be if the Jewish guy comes in and has this excellent work ethic. He has no reason to not get the job, and then another person comes in who has a horrible work ethic, and I give the job to the person who has the horrible work ethic, and I tell the Jewish guy when I come back to him, the guy who has the great work ethic, and I tell him when I come back to him, the reason why you didn't get this job is because you're Jewish and I don't like you people, right? Like that would be blatant anti-Semitism. That would be an example of it, and that should never be done. That's horrible. Hatred. So that would be like partiality, for example. Now, hatred is that's a big word these days, right? People use hatred for all different sorts of things. But when I talk about hatred, I'm looking to define that biblically. I'm not talking about saying things that offend people. Okay, that's not hatred. Right. A lot of times in the world today, you see people will accuse Christians of hatred just because they say that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, for example, and that the wages of sin is death, or that if a person does not repent and trust in Christ, then they will go to hell, regardless of their background, regardless of who they are. A lot of people will say that just because Christians say that, well, that's hatred. That's not hatred. That's not hatred. Hatred is, if you look at the scriptures, hatred is you dislike a person so much, you hate them so much that you would kill them if you had the opportunity. Okay, and this goes back to like what Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, where he basically said that murder can be committed in your heart by hating someone. Right? It's you hate someone to the extent that you would kill them if you had the opportunity. That is hatred. Okay. And so when I talk about anti-Semitism being partiality against a certain group of people, or hatred against a certain group of people, that's what I'm talking about, okay? That's what I'm talking about. So that's what I mean when I say anti-Semitism, okay? And as opposed to anti-Semitism, just like as opposed to any other type of thing, we are to love other people as Christians. We're to love our friends, and we're to love our enemies. All right? And this is all very straightforward, normal biblical teaching. There's nothing novel here. There's nothing new here, okay? So a couple of things. Let's now look and see if Nick Fuentes fits that definition. Does he hate or show partiality against this group of people because of the fact that they're simply Jewish? Well, let's look at a couple of things regarding Nick Fuentes. And again, just ask ourselves the question, should we be listening to him as Christians? Should we be paying attention to him as Christians? The first thing that I noticed was there's this post by Eric Metaxas. Eric Metaxas, I like Eric Metaxas. I can't 100% say I agree with everything he says, but most of the things he says are pretty good. And he put out, you could see this post here, he put out this article that was written by someone else, and he mentions this thing about the phrase Christ is King, and he misuses it as surely as Satanists who steal Holy Communion from Catholic churches abuse the body and blood of Christ. I don't necessarily agree with that parallel. Not that I don't think that Nick Fuentes is wrong to use that phrase basically as a mockery. That's wrong. But I don't think that should stop us as Christians from saying Christ is King, because like I said last week, we know the definition of that phrase, and it's from the scriptures. It's not from what Nick Fuentes thinks. We don't care what he thinks, okay? We don't care what he thinks. We care what the scriptures have to say about it. So anyway, with that being said, let's look at this article. This is from The Stream. Looks like it's written by John Zmirak. I think that's what it is. Okay. Let's look at this section, the abuse of holy things, blasphemy. It's because that beautiful confession of faith was hijacked by non-believers, by Gentile tribalists who saw it as a clever way to exclude and insult Jews whom they resented for political reasons. As far as I can tell, this phrase, once spoken with reverence by martyrs, and I would add, still spoken with reverence by all those who are truly of the church of God, right, who are truly saved, still spoken with reverence by us, but it wasn't spoken with reference by Nick Fuentes. Anyway, was popularized as a racial cudgel by the vulgar online demagogue Nick Fuentes, a 25-year-old white supremacist who has openly praised Hitler and fantasized about marrying a 16-year-old girl. And then this is that quote from this is where Metaxas quoted this guy in his post as well. He purloined the phrase "Christ is King" and misuses it as surely as Satanists who steal Holy Communion from Catholic churches abuse the body and blood of Christ. I've written here more than once in some depth on the toxic influence of Fuentes among young, disgruntled conservatives grasping for some explanation of why their country has been hijacked, tyrannized, and invaded. Just as during the Black Plague and the Great Depression, some people found it easier to blame, drumroll, the Jews. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. And so basically what this guy is pointing out, he's pointing out some significant character flaws here with Fuentes, and we'll just take that in for now. And let's move on. Let's move on. So again, we're just asking ourselves the question here today: should we be listening to Nick Fuentes? Should we be listening to him? And the other thing is, I'm going to put up a couple of posts by accounts that I am not 100% familiar with, and I cannot endorse all the things that they post. I can't endorse all the things that they say. The reason why I'm bringing in these posts from these other accounts is because they are accounts that seem to be more in tune with what is going on with Nick Fuentes and what he's up to, whereas I am not, and a lot of the guys in my circles also are not. There are some, and they post on him every now and then. But these people are just like feverishly post about Nick Fuentes all the time. So the reason why I'm bringing in these other accounts is not because I endorse them. I don't. I cannot endorse everything that these accounts say. But anyway, this one's from Canadian Clip. And then it just basically says, Nick Fuentes, what is fascism? And then his answer is, it's authority, it's tradition, it's patriotism and chauvinism, it's common sense. It's common sense. And I'm going to link that post so that you can watch the video of Nick Fuentes literally saying that very thing. And then he brings up this thing where if I had to choose to run my country between some person who's apparently a transgender person and Hitler, well, I would choose Hitler. Why would you bring that up? Why would you bring up such a ridiculous, foolish binary like that, right? I mean, if you really believe, Nick, that Christ is king, then neither one of those people should ever cross your mind as a ruler. Neither one of those people. So yeah, that's one thing that is also disturbing regarding Nick Fuentes. And then there's this other one here by Benjamin Ryan. Again, like I said, not an endorsement of Benjamin Ryan. I have no idea who Benjamin Ryan is, but there is a clip here of Nick Fuentes. I don't know. Is he lecturing, teaching? I'm not sure what he's doing here. But this is what Benjamin says. After Nick Fuentes called for a genocide of Jewish Americans, white nationalist ally Sneeko took the podium and said that Fuentes was destined to become president of the USA. These are neo-Nazis, is what it says. Again, I don't really keep up with Sneeko. That's not even the purpose of why I'm here today. I don't really care about Sneeko. I'm not here to talk about him. But I did watch the clip, and that those first couple of words where it says Nick Fuentes called for a genocide of Jewish Americans, that's pretty much accurate. I watched the clip. That's pretty much accurate, and I can put the link in there for you as well. He basically said, he basically said, "We will make them die." All right. That's what he said about Jewish people. He said, "We will make them die." And as a Christian, killing people who have not committed any sort of federal, state crime or anything like that, killing people who are innocent and don't deserve, as far as the perspective from the law of the land, killing people who don't deserve to die, is wrong. That's wrong. That is murderous, and that qualifies as hate. Like I said at the open here, anti-Semitism, just like anti-anything else, would be defined as one of the things it would be defined as is hate towards a group of people just because of the fact that they are Jewish, right? And that's clearly what's going on here. That's clearly what's going on here. So the first question that we kind of posed at the beginning of this show about whether or not Nick Fuentes is anti-Semitic, the answer is yes, he is. And was I right to call him anti-Semitic last week? Yes, I was. And to those of you out there who don't think that this is the case, who said that I was slandering him, I mean, I talked about him for, I don't know, how long did I talk about him? For like 5 minutes? I mean, I hardly even brought him up last week, and people came out of the woodwork to say that I was slandering him. I barely even mentioned him. Well, now today I am going to mention him because it's concerning to me that there are so many people out there who actually listen to him seriously. This is wrong. Just like you shouldn't be listening to Joel Osteen seriously, just like you shouldn't be getting your theology from Joe Biden, just like you shouldn't be getting your theology from whoever that transgender person was that Nick Fuentes was talking about, and just like you shouldn't be getting your theology from Hitler, and just like you shouldn't be getting your theology from any of those people, you also should not be getting your theology or advice, moral advice, anything from Nick Fuentes, just like you shouldn't be getting theology or moral advice from any of those other people. Okay, this is not someone that you should be listening to. And honestly, when I was looking through X over this past week, I have seen so many people talk supportively about Nick Fuentes, and I just don't think he's at a spot where you guys should be propping him up. I don't think that he is someone that we as Christians should be listening to. Okay, and I also saw a bunch of different instances where people were like, if you call yourself a Christian, you should stop supporting Nick Fuentes. You should stop listening to Nick Fuentes. And people jumped on those people, okay? Again, that just demonstrates the fact that there are a lot of people out there who listen to Nick Fuentes seriously, and they actually want to know what he has to say, and they actually take his advice. Wrong. That's wrong. You should not do that. Okay. Let's move on. So how should we act as a result of this? What should we do in light of these things? Well, first of all, what we can say is that Nick Fuentes is not an example of a Christian. He's not an example of a Christian. What I would say is that there are a lot of people who call themselves Christian who are looking up to Nick Fuentes as if he is a good example of a Christian. I don't see how anything could be further from the truth. He is not a good example of a Christian. Those couple of posts that we read and the article that we read should show you that. Okay, that should show you that. And if you look at Titus chapter 2, verse 6, I love this verse because Paul is basically going over certain things that he wants to specifically say to each different type of person. So he talks about older men, he talks about women, and now he's talking about younger men. And he talks about things that specifically they should be doing to help them function in the body, okay, in the church body. And look at what he says to the young men. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. And that word self-controlled is actually translated. I like the New American Standard 1995 version's translation of that word. They translate it sensible. And I think that is just so important because a lot of times young men can be very not sensible, very insensible, very foolish, okay? And hey, I'm speaking to you as a young man, and I understand and I know this firsthand because even in my own heart sometimes there are foolish things that come up in my mind, and I have to say, no, that's not a sensible thing to do, and I'm supposed to be sensible, okay? It's interesting that charge is given to the young men to be sensible. So ask yourself, is Nick Fuentes being sensible? And if the answer is no, which it has to be based off of the things that we have seen, if the answer is no, then you shouldn't be listening to him. You should not be seriously listening to him, okay? If you're going to listen to him to refute him or something, or to call him to repentance or something, different story. But if you're listening to him, actually trying to hear what he has to say and trying to apply what he has to say, don't do it. Don't do it, okay? He is an example of a young man who's not sensible. And the thing that bothers me about Nick Fuentes is, as many people have pointed out, Nick Fuentes is trying to take this phrase, just like many other people have been trying to take this phrase, Christ is King, and co-opt it to mean something else. Well, praise God that they're never going to succeed at that, because who decides what Christ is King means? God decides what Christ is King means, and he has said what Christ is King means in his word. And we talked about this last week. We talked about how Jesus says in Matthew 28, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Okay, so if Jesus says that, if that's what Jesus has said, then that's what the truth is. And that's what Christ is King means. It doesn't mean whatever these other people are trying to make it mean. And of course, there's a push from some other people that are basically saying, well, because Nick Fuentes said Christ is King, and because all these other people said Christ is King that are allegedly anti-Semitic, Nick Fuentes is anti-Semitic, but these other people who are also potentially anti-Semitic, I don't have time to study whether or not they actually are, but basically they're saying that because all these other people said Christ is King, and they said it in some wrong way, well, you Christians shouldn't say Christ is King. You guys shouldn't say Christ is King either. Well, no, we say no to that. We say no to that as Christians. We say that the scriptures tell us what Christ is King means. Christ is King has never been anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic, and it never will be anti-Semitic, because the scriptures tell us what that means. The scriptures tell us what it means, okay? So Nick Fuentes doesn't get to control the meaning of what Jesus is King means. He doesn't get to control the meaning of that. We submit as Christians to the Bible, not to Nick Fuentes' teaching. And, you ask, well, what does Nick Fuentes think it means? So I don't even care what Nick Fuentes thinks it means. I don't care. I don't really care what he thinks about anything, honestly. Okay? And I don't listen to him seriously, and neither should you. Neither should you. And, it's not like, he's still obviously a valued, dignified human being, right? He has dignity. He's made in the image of God, of course. So we don't want to dehumanize him either. That's wrong. That would be unbiblical. but he's not an example to me. He's not an example to me, not a role model, and I will not esteem him a teacher, leader, or important voice of any kind. Okay? And to those of you who say that that you might say, I've seen you out there, you might say, oh, anti-Semitism is not something that's happening. That's not something that's real. It's not something that's happening. I mean, did you not just see on these posts? It is something that's happening. It is something that's happening. And if you want, like I said, I'm going to link that clip of Fuentes actually teaching or lecturing or whatever he was doing. And it's shocking because when he starts saying these things that are very blatantly anti-Semitic, when he starts saying these things, people start applauding loudly and cheering loudly. And of course, all you have to do is go on X and see all these people that are applauding him and cheering for him. So don't tell me that anti-Semitism doesn't exist, because as I've looked into it, I've seen more anti-Semitic things over the course of these past 2 weeks than I have ever seen before in my life. Okay, well, I guess that would exclude those horrific attacks by Hamas last year. But I really think that that's probably part of that's part of what has brought this back to front and center, right? That's part of what's brought this back. And I saw this great post from Phil Johnson as well. We talked about Phil Johnson a couple of weeks ago, but he sees this, right? So I'm not the. I just want to point out to you, I'm not the only one who sees this. I'm not the only one who's looking at the church and saying, why suddenly is not only America, but the church in America, all of a sudden, why are there people who are like anti-Semitic voices that are just popping up? Why? And that's one thing that Phil Johnson pointed out. He's like, why all of a sudden are people just so given to anti-Semitism? Okay. He was one person that recognized it. As I talked about last week, Owen Strahan has really, he's really been strong on it recently. You know, he's been paying a lot of attention to it because it is something that needs to be paid attention to. And Doug Wilson, like I said, Doug Wilson has been, he's been on this for a while. He's been paying attention to the fact that this is going on for a very long time. And so with all those things in mind, I'm not the only one who sees this, okay? I'm not the only one who sees this. And what I would say is, if you listen to Nick Fuentes, if you listen to his teaching, you need to get yourself away from him, all right? Maybe, hopefully, someday he'll mature, but for now, you got to get away from him, all right? So, hopefully you guys enjoyed this week. I know this is kind of a heavy topic, and I did. This, like I said, this was one of those episodes that I just kind of did because I had to. I did it because I had to, because I saw so many things from people just this past week. They came out in defense of Nick Fuentes and in defense of his views. Okay, it's one thing if you want to tell me to be nicer to the guy or to treat him with more dignity or something like that. Or to treat him as an image bearer of God. You know, I understand that, and I'm committed to treating him as an image bearer of God. Of course, you treat everybody as an image bearer of God, no matter how hard it is. You have to love your neighbors. You have to love your enemies, right? But I cannot recommend his teaching. All right, have a good week, and we'll see you next time.